last week Howard called me and said, we need a keynote speaker for this program. Wow, 50 years. Charlie Ferguson is 50 years over, right? On teaching. That's quite a group to join. I think you ought to give Charlie a big hand. He's been an inspiration for all of us. You'll have to bear with me. When you get this old, you talk a little slower. And you don't buy green bananas, you don't know if you'll get back up here again. But I have several people I want to recognize, and I have a family I want to introduce. And I do have one story about a banquet 50 years ago. So, but as I go to thank people, the first thing I want to do is thank our Heavenly Father, because I'd have never got here for this 50 years without Him. When I graduated from high school, I farmed for 4 years, and I was in the Navy for 4 years. And then when I got to U of I and took Rhetoric 101, if you didn't get a B or better, you had to take extra rhetoric. And I looked at that vocabulary test, and I did not know an answer. And I prayed to the Lord right then and said, God, get me through this, and I promise I'll teach all my life. I got an A on that vocabulary test, and I didn't know any of the questions, and I'm still teaching as much as I can. 2 years ago, I was elected to the New Athens Hall of Fame. It's got Whitey Herzog, 3 Major League Baseball players, some doctors from Washington, D.C. And, of course, like Jim Geilinger taught you, you fill in every blank. And I told him about being an EMT and serving on boards and getting theater up. But it was the agriculture that got me there. And people, this is the organization that gives you that opportunity. You've heard all these men talking before of all the opportunities. You know, I never had FFA at Proviso High School. And when I started studying ag-ed, I thought, what are we going to have this FFA for? I'm going to teach agriculture. It didn't take me 3 weeks at the high school to realize that was the best teaching tool I had. And the FFA is the greatest organization, and the ag teachers are the greatest group. Think of any other field where you teach, where you just teach and you go home. You don't have groups like this. And so I want to thank all the ag teachers, but I can't mention them all, so I'm going to pick on just one. Would Robert Heavner stand up here a minute? Bob and I went to the U of I together. In fact, we were in one class, we had Dr. Zitch for horticulture, and he had just told us to be very careful with these grafting knives. You could take a finger off. And 5 minutes later, we were driving this young man to Carlisle Clinic to get his fingers sewed back on. So we both went to Section 22 at the same time. Bob started at Valmeyer and I started at New Athens. And we started having one contest after another, trying to beat each other. And it got so competitive, he even gets Howard Heavner to take 4 years of ag so he can try to beat me in these contests. So we've been fighting with Howard Heavner ever since he was a freshman in high school. And I would like Ryan Kinsinger, are you back there somewhere? Ryan, stand up a minute. Ryan is the new freshman ag teacher at New Athens High School. His father got my first American farmer degree. So we're hoping that we got New Athens really back on the right track now. Good luck in your work. I got a lot of family to introduce. Muriel is Mrs. New Athens FFA for I don't know how long. I've never done anything without her. We've just been working together as a team. And I started New Athens on July 1st, 1961. We were married in August 1961. And the first week she ended up substituting at school in PE. And we've been together ever since, and I could never do anything without her at my side. My three sons, when they started ag, I had them in agriculture for 10 years in a row. We never lost a parliamentary procedure contest in that 10 years. They lived FFA with us. Tim, raise your hand, our oldest. We had the first girl in New Athens to walk across the stage and get an award at the state convention. We had elected a girl reporter before they elect girls at FFA. And as soon as the state reporter came by, he took a shine to her. And the first year she got one of the outstanding reporter awards. And the rest of the schools didn't have that much chance, I guess. And then we had one of the first chapter presidents. And so what happened to Tim when he ran for state office? He had the most votes of anybody that did not get elected that year. But that was the first year they elected 2 girls to state offices. Tim has been in communications. He's been publisher of newspapers. He's been on radio stations. His wife is not with him today because besides 5 children, 3 of them are grown, but they're usually at the house. They also have 4 foster children at home right now, and she's home with them. Jeff, raise your hand there, Jeff. He's our middle son. He has a patent. He works at Sims Products in Effingham, and he'd have to come and explain it to you, but you know these little ads they put in magazines that fall out all the time and drive us batty? He's invented a machine that if one of them is not in the printing, it kicks it out and it lets the printer know that they're not in there. And he's been at Bolingbrook. He had to drive all the way back here to be here today because they're putting in some new machines up there. Greg's our youngest. Greg, when he was a freshman, I got hemolytic anemia and I missed some school. And I sent him to the Creed speaking contest. I did not know that you had 25 answers that the questions the judges would ask. He got to second in the state and never knew there were any patented questions. So they've all been active. He right now is in charge of public radio and television at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. I have our two youngest grandchildren here, Maverick and Sarah. We have 9 grandchildren. We have 3 great-grandchildren. And so our family has grown, and they're very supportive of everything we do. Back in 1961, I went to my first banquet. I was just going to start at New Athens. It was at a church in Champaign, Illinois. And back then, they sort of scared you when you were coming in. You were supposed to look out for Mr. Damish and J.E. Hill. They weren't going to let you get around anywhere. You had to be careful. They had, I think there was a Burdette Graham and Artie Eiler. They had a barbershop quartet. And they were honoring Mr. Clarida for 40 years at Centralia, one high school. Cedric Goller took over that year and went another. Centralia had 2 ag teachers over 80 years. And all these names, and I'm sitting there thinking, do you get 20 years or 30? Wow, wouldn't that be something? And here it is 50. Well, back then the state office came out and visited you. And Mr. Ralph Guthrie was my first one to come to visit. And he said, are you going to go to the parliamentary procedure contest next month? And I said, what's that? And he said, well, you got to go to parliamentary procedure. And so instead of him evaluating me that day, with our double period classes, he spent the whole day teaching my classes parliamentary procedure. And that's when I had my first taste of it. Well, we got so wild with parliamentary procedure, Valmar, when they'd make a motion at those cutthroat contests, they'd move the whole thing at New Athens because we were centrally located and we could amend it. So our kids had to be sharp enough to say, good, we'd love to hold it, but then we're going to have to amend the date because we can't have it that day. So it used to be big wars back then. But anyway, I am so thankful. But Mr. Hill, J.E. Hill, something I don't think anybody in this room, no matter how far back you go, knows. In 1968, my 6 officers were all 6 on the High School National Honor Society. We had a 2nd place in the state in public speaking. We had 1 member that played a solo in the national band at Kansas City, and we'd won most of the sectional contests. And the superintendent called the principal and me and said, we're going to take a ride to Springfield. We're going to see about changing the ag program. And here I thought we were doing pretty good. And what they wanted to do was take the ag shop away and put the band in there. And the principal was not for it, but the school board president and a rural ag member and the principal and I, we all went to Springfield. And we met with Mr. Hill. And I can quote him. He looked at that agricultural school board member and said, you ought to go home and resign. You are a traitor to the people you represent. And that man, and the board member said, I have my equipment repaired by the dealers. It turned out his brother-in-law was in charge of the dealership. And J.E. Hill started quoting every foundation person, that implement dealer that gave money, and he just went over him and he said, they all repair their own. And he said, you better let them train some mechanics in New Athens in case these people ever retire. You need someone to fix your equipment. And he said, you people won't get a penny if you don't keep that ag shop. And that's the kind of people we had in office. And this is the way it's been all through. And so I thank you very much because you people have made it a wonderful 50 years experience.